The Lindbergh Kidnapping, America's Crime of the Century. Dark Files. Welcome back to Dark Files, where we uncover the most chilling and notorious crime stories from history. In today's video, we're diving into one of America's most infamous criminal cases, the Lindbergh Kidnapping. It was a crime that gripped the nation, a crime that led to one of the largest manhunts in U.S. history. It all started on the night of March 1st, 1932, when Charles Lindbergh Jr., the 20-month-old son of famous aviator Charles Lindbergh and his wife, Anne-Marie Lindbergh, was stolen from his crib in the middle of the night. What followed was a nightmare for the Lindbergh family, one that would captivate the country and lead to a series of events that still echoes through criminal history today. The crime, the investigation, the trial, everything about this case was extraordinary. So, what really happened that night? Who was behind the kidnapping? And how did the case unfold to become one of the most controversial and tragic stories in American criminal history? Stick with us as we break down the chilling details of the Lindbergh Kidnapping. The kidnapping, a nation in shock. On the evening of March 1st, 1932, in Hopewell, New Jersey, the Lindbergh family's world was shattered. Charles Lindbergh Jr., their precious baby boy, was kidnapped from his nursery while his parents were just a few rooms away in their home. It was around p.m. when the Lindberghs last saw their son. Charles Jr. was put to bed, and everything seemed calm. But by the time the couple retired to their room that night, the baby had disappeared. The window to his nursery had been opened, and a ladder was found leaning against the house, a clear sign that whoever took Charles Jr. had planned the kidnapping meticulously. The crime itself was chilling. The child was taken without a trace, and the only clues were a ransom note and signs of forced entry. The family immediately notified the police, but the horror was just beginning. The ransom demand a race against time. The next day, a ransom note arrived at the Lindbergh home. The note demanded 50 OOA fortune at the time in exchange for the safe return of their son. The note was carefully written, and it included specific instructions for how to deliver the money. The Lindberghs were under intense pressure. They didn't know who had their son, and they didn't know whether their baby was alive or dead. But one thing was clear: the kidnappers were watching them. The police, desperate for answers, followed the ransom instructions to the letter. But things didn't go as planned. Charles Lindbergh, a man of action and precision, took the situation into his own hands. Despite the risks, he cooperated with the demands, setting up a series of complex meetings with the kidnapper in an attempt to save his son. The Lindberghs even paid a second ransom when the first payment didn't result in the return of their baby. But despite the money changing hands, Charles Jr. was never returned. The discovery, a grim realization. After weeks of fruitless searching and following every lead, the Lindberghs were hit with the most devastating news imaginable. On May 12, 1932, just over 2 months after the kidnapping, a worker discovered the body of Charles Lindbergh Jr. less than a mile away from the Lindbergh home. The child's body had been partially buried, and it was clear that he had been murdered shortly after being abducted. The discovery sent shockwaves through the nation. The Lindberghs, already devastated by the loss of their child, now had to face the reality of a brutal crime that could never be undone. The young child, only 20 months old, had been taken from them, and no ransom in the world could bring him back. The investigation searching for a killer. The discovery of Charles Jr.'s body marked the beginning of an intense investigation. The authorities were desperate for answers, but they faced significant challenges. There were no solid suspects, and the clues were few and far between. However, one key piece of evidence that emerged was the ladder that had been used to climb into the window. It was found to have fingerprints, and soon it became a critical part of the case. The police examined the prints in detail and began to focus on the construction of the ladder and its potential link to a local carpenter. Months of painstaking investigation followed, with hundreds of leads, interviews, and false hopes. But nothing concrete came forward until the focus shifted to a man who had been living in the area at the time: the arrest of Bruno Hauptmann. In September 1934, nearly 2 years after the kidnapping, the investigation took a dramatic turn. Bruno Richard Hauptmann, a German immigrant and handyman, was arrested after his handwriting matched a ransom notes left behind by the kidnapper. Additionally, money from the ransom was found in Hauptmann's possession, linking him directly to the crime. Hauptmann was charged with kidnapping and murder. He denied the accusations, but the evidence against him seemed overwhelming. Hauptmann's arrest was met with mixed reactions. Some were convinced of his guilt, while others believed he was being framed by a justice system desperate to close the case. The trial of Bruno Hauptmann became one of the most highly publicized in American history, attracting attention from around the world. The trial, a battle for justice. The trial of Bruno Hauptmann began in January 1935, and it was a media frenzy. The courtroom was filled with photographers, reporters, and spectators from all over the country. The Lindberghs themselves attended the trial, seeking justice for their son. The prosecution presented strong evidence against Hauptmann, including the money found in his possession, his fingerprints on the ransom notes, and witnesses who had seen him in the area around the Lindbergh home. The defense, however, argued that the evidence was circumstantial and that Hauptmann was being used as a scapegoat. The trial lasted for several months, with both sides presenting conflicting theories. The public was on edge, eager for a verdict, but the question remained: was Hauptmann truly guilty, or was he just a convenient target for a crime that had captivated the nation? The verdict: guilty or innocent. On February 13, 1935, the jury returned with their verdict. Bruno Hauptmann was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to death, despite his protests of innocence. Hauptmann was executed by electrocution on April 3, 1936, at Sing Sing prison. The case was officially closed, but doubts lingered. Many believed that Hauptmann was wrongfully convicted, claiming that the evidence against him was not as clear-cut as it seemed. Some still argued that there were other individuals involved in the crime, and that Hauptmann may have been a convenient scapegoat for a case that had to be solved at any cost. The enduring mystery of the Lindbergh kidnapping. The Lindbergh kidnapping remains one of the most infamous cases in American criminal history, a father's worst nightmare. The case shook the nation to its core and sparked debates that continue to this day. Was Bruno Hauptmann the true killer, or was there a deeper conspiracy at play? Despite the conviction and execution, the Lindbergh case still raises many questions. The Lindberghs' loss was felt by all of America, and the case became known as the crime of the century. As for the Lindbergh family, they never truly recovered from the pain of losing their son. The case will forever be a reminder of the fragility of life, the complexities of justice, and the heartbreaking reality of loss. Thank you for joining us today on Dark Files, as we revisited one of America's most tragic and captivating criminal cases, the Lindbergh kidnapping. If you found this case as haunting as we did, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more true crime stories that leave a lasting